Welcome to Monday's version of Talkin Tigers. I'm Jim Derry. It wasn't as easy as some thought it might be, but LSU came back to Baton Rouge with a 34-24 win over Syracuse on Saturday and a 3-0 record. Most notably, it was another ridiculous performance by Leonard Fournette, who unquestionably is the early frontrunner for the Heisman Trophy. He became the first Tiger to rush for more than 200 yards in consecutive games. For a bit more insight, we turn to LSU beat writer Jim Kleinpeter, who was in the Carrier Dome. And Jim, it was an interesting game, maybe not the whitewash some fans were hoping for, but a win nonetheless.
Yes, and it was if LSU didn't have Leonard Fournette, they could have been in big trouble because for all he did, they still struggled to win by 10 points. They never could put Syracuse away, and it mainly was because of 14 penalties for 120 yards. That Fournette had 110 yards of penalties wiped out of rushing yardage and a touchdown wiped out by penalties, and he never got that yardage back. So he could have had a monster, even more of a monster game than he did. But he was fast and strong and just otherworldly as he has been this year. This
game was similar to the game against Mississippi State, where they, sort of shot themselves in the foot a few times, but ended up finding a way to win the game. Is that something that's going to be a big focus of attention this week?
Absolutely. Penalties Les has talked about penalties. They've had big penalty games in the past, but he spent more time talking about them in his post-game address to the media and today at his weekly press conference. He spent a lot of time talking about them, and, he's really kind of ticked off about it as much as he can be. And I think the other thing about LSU is they defensively they've done a real good job in the first half. At all three games this year, they have yet to give up a first half touchdown, but they've given up 8 in the second half of the three games combined. So something may be there, but in this game that has something to do with the penalties. The offense committed the penalties in the first half, and the defense committed them in the second half. It just made it. It took forever to LSU finally put the game away. But they didn't do it until Fournette's last carry, a 30-yarder.
Well, you got to talk more about number 7. I mean, it's just ridiculous. I asked you a similar question last week, but it bears repeating. In your career, watching and covering LSU, have you seen anything like what Fournette has done over the first 3 weeks of a season?
No, LSU's never had a player like this in football. I mean, Charlie Alexander was close, but he didn't do this when he was a sophomore. And I think the closest comparison is maybe Billy Cannon, because he was so much bigger and faster than everybody around him. He didn't pile up a lot of yardage. In fact, Leonard Fournette already has more rushing yardage than Billy Cannon had in his Heisman Trophy season. But he's so big and fast, and it's not just that, because big guys can be fast, but he's got excellent feet. He can dance around in the backfield. He can make cuts. He can make the most subtle of cuts, and he just runs right by people. I really think Syracuse misjudged how fast he was. They see this big guy and they think, here he comes up the middle, I'm going to take my angle. And then before they know it, they got no shot at him. He's gone. He's by him. And he outran him for 50 yards on his touchdown, and then he outran the defensive backs even longer on the one that was called back, an 87-yarder that was called back. So he's pretty unstoppable. It takes a real team of really good defenders to stop him.
Well, it's interesting because it seems like he's running with a chip on his shoulder. I mean, last year I didn't notice the jawing a little bit, and knowing Leonard a little bit from when I covering prep in high school days, he doesn't talk a lot, but he's been talking a little bit these last 2 games.
He's very mature, and no matter what you say about him, he deflects every question that gives you a chance to bring out any ego you might want to find. He's a leader. The players like him. I mean, yeah. It in a way kind of reminds me of Tyrann Mathieu. Everybody don't realize how much a player like that motivates the rest of the team. They draw energy from them, and when they see him do that, they want him. They want to create a situation where he can keep doing it, because it's things they've never seen before. And so Leonard is a good teammate. He thinks of his offensive line. He always talks about him when we ask him about what he's, a run or anything specific. So Leonard seems to have it all, and it's really fun, kind of fun covering. We don't get to talk to him that much, but when we do, do, it's he'll say something interesting usually.
Well, thanks for joining us, Jim. Thanks for your insight.
My pleasure.
All right, talk to you later. And for today's extra point, let's look ahead to Saturday's opponent, Eastern Michigan, and throw out some numbers to you. The first is 127. That's where the Eagles rank in rushing defense, which just so happens to be dead last among Division I schools. They're allowing 373 yards per game on the ground, which is 59 yards more per game than Idaho, the team in 126th place. In a 58-36 loss to Army last weekend, they allowed 556 rushing yards and 7 touchdowns to 6 different ball carriers who had 60 or more yards on the ground. Well, I guess we'll leave you chomping at the bit because you can figure out what that means. We're looking forward to this weekend. We'll chat again on Thursday when we talk more in depth about Saturday's non-conference tilt. See you then.